What if the struggles you carry aren't entirely your own? What if some of the heaviness in your energy field didn't start with you, but with your ancestors? Today on Call Cut with Angélique, we're diving deep into bloodline entanglements, the unseen energetic ties passed down through the family bloodlines, and how they can distort your energy field until you consciously call cut and realign them. Hi, I'm Angélique Letizia, a writer, director, and creator of the Call Cut method. It's a tool to shift your frequency, rewrite your inner script, and realign you with the energy of your highest potential. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes pass to alchemizing that energy. So if you're ready to interrupt the script, reclaim your power, and write your story that you were actually born to live, you're in the right place. Bloodline entanglements are patterns, traumas, vows, and distortions in the energy field that repeat through generations. They can manifest as chronic anxiety, self-sabotage, low self-esteem, addictions, or even just a sense of carrying burdens that don't actually belong to you. Mark Wolin, in the book It Didn't Start With You, quotes, "Traumas can be biologically inherited, altering gene expression for generations. We may relive fragments of a traumatic event that we never personally experienced." Now, this is something we have to take into consideration because not only are we dealing with our own traumas, but we're also dealing with traumas that have been embedded in our DNA and in our bloodlines. And this is really important for us to know because we can go to therapy and we can go do all of these things to help correct the traumas and the dramas and the abuses that were done to us in this lifetime. But if there are other distortions in the energy field that we're not addressing, we may not actually get down to the root of everything. And so we do have to go a little bit deeper. We do have to look at the entire bloodline. We have to look at all of our family members, whether we like them or not, to decide, are there recurring patterns? And we can do this for good or for bad, right? Because you definitely want to know the good as well. Like, what are our strengths as a family? What do we exude? But what do we also project? I can tell you my family is, especially on my mother's side, is low self-esteem and competition. And competition comes from this idea of inferiority that is projected as a superiority. And what ultimately ended up happening in my mother's family is rage and anger that nobody even knew why they're so angry. To this day, I have relatives that are angry that if you actually sat them down, they'll say, well, back in 1997 is not now. And unfortunately, we do have to agree that the past is dust. But here's something interesting about this that I really want to highlight. You can get stuck in the past when you have a bloodline entanglement that keeps you trapped in a negative feedback loop. So if you are somebody who feels slighted, if you are someone who feels they got something and I didn't, and I deserved that and they got it, and you trap yourself in that feedback loop of it's not fair, it should be mine, it's not fair, that can actually cause you to be stuck in this part of the quantum field, and it prevents you from moving forward. We live in prisons of our own making. So even though it may seem on the outside that we are being trapped by something, the reality is very different. The reality is that something in our consciousness is trapping us. So when we think about that on a larger level, we can agree that when family members are excluded, or traumas are hidden, or descendants unconsciously entangle themselves with the fate of those before them, as quoted in Family Constellations, one of my favorite books, you will notice that these patterns continuously play out. One thing I have to say about my brother and I have a younger brother who is a year and 2 weeks. We were even born in the same month, right? Both Leos. We had a very tumultuous, I would say middle years, right? Our 20s and our 30s, especially having the influence of our father, who was a divide and conquer type of personality. He loved to play one person against the other. Now, my biological father has that, but my mother's family has that as well. So my brother and I would get this from all sides, this kind of playing one against the other, playing one against the other. And I would say that the odds were not in favor of my brother and I truly being friends or having the kind of relationship that on some level we both wanted. Because not only were we both dealing with the trauma of a divorce, a very ugly divorce, of abandonment, of low self-esteem, but we were also dealing with the family trauma that came from both sides, my mother and my father. They both have a lot of trauma and low self-esteem and low self-worth. As a matter of fact, my father's family had a lot of abuse attached to it. My grandmother was sexually assaulted by her grandfather and later on became an alcoholic and abused my father. And I have to just say this before I go any further. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, I loved very, very much. In her, I found a kindred spirit of sorts. My grandmother was very down to earth, very tell it like it is, and no BS. She was one of those women that walked in the room and told you like it was, and she did not play any games. She didn't pull any punches. If you were wrong, she called you out on it. And she did this all the time. She didn't make excuses for anybody's bad behavior. I absolutely love and adore her, and I miss her terribly. But she abused my father, right? Because somebody who was abused, if they don't get the help and go in and turn that pain into power, they become the victims of that pain. So you have a couple of choices, but they're choices on two sides of the polarity spectrum. Either we become that with which we are fighting against, or we become the champion against it. If you think about the Dark Knight in Batman, right? The Dark Knight was the shadow of Batman. And you start to see that if we don't have a certain healing or an elevation or a facing the shadow, of sitting in the shadow and looking in that mirror and saying, who am I? And what do I need to know and learn so I can get to the next level? How do I get to the highest expression of myself for the good, not just of me, but for humanity? And it's a question we have to ask ourselves, and it's a question that requires a lot of self-reflection. Trauma, which is simply energy that hasn't been processed, when inherited or experienced, is embedded as a distortion in the auric field and in the nervous system. This can then cause chronic blocks in prosperity or relationships, a repeating negative feedback loop of destructive behaviors, and sudden emotional reactions that feel out of proportion to the actual experience. This is why shadow work is so important. This is why we do need to sit in that reflection and stare at ourselves and say, what needs to be healed? Form follows thought. And so if we live our lives in these negative patterns, if we live our lives with these negative thoughts, if we are using these unconscious family patterns that we don't even know, it makes it a lot harder for us to get to that level that we see in our mind, but we can't seem to touch it. It always feels like you're a window shopper in your own life. You can see the beautiful life you are destined to manifest right there in the window, and yet it feels like there's this glass in front of it and it's just 20 feet from stardom, so to speak. That is what these distortions do. They create that illusion of that glass. If we take the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, then we have to understand that distortions in the inner field eventually show up in outer reality as unresolved. So how do we break these bloodline entanglements? The illusion is that we're stuck. The illusion is that we can't. For any of you who are Game of Thrones fans, when the Mother of Dragons said she was going to break the wheel, that is the best way I could explain this to you. Thinking about breaking the wheel. There are people who come in, they are born into bloodlines specifically to break ancestral patterns. But you need to know that that's what you're here to do, and you need to know what those patterns are. So the first step is awareness, naming the distortion and bringing it into consciousness. Rituals, therapy, or energy work can help you cut the loop. But even simple things, just talking to yourself. You don't have to have a mirror right in front of your face. You can just have a conversation with yourself. I will put headphones in my ears and I will have no music on, but I will walk and I will talk to myself. And I swear it works. Having a conversation with myself and really talking myself through, why did that upset me? What is it that got me ticked off? What is it that got me upset? Or conversely, why was that the best day ever? What do I notice about my energy when I am in my best self? We have to be able to see and notice these things, not just once in a while, but all the time. Energy work is a practice, the same way you get up and you practice the piano, you practice dancing, you practice singing. It takes practice to become good at anything, and self-mastery is no different. The call-cut method brings us in real time a tool to consistently be reevaluating how we interact in our world. And why I found that this really worked well was because it's a consistent taking in information, analyzing that information, deciding how that information plays in to your storyline, right? Because you can declare out loud, this story is not mine. I release what does not belong to me and I realign with my highest self. And I tell people constantly, if you say that one line, I release what does not belong to me and I realign with my highest self, and you say that out loud over and over again, every time you feel that something is not in energetic alignment with you, you will find that eventually you are no longer coming up against those scenarios. Decrees. A decree is very powerful because you can get your intention and your energy behind it. A decree is not a request. It's not maybe this will happen. It is a command issued from the higher self. The word itself comes from the Latin decretum, something decided. In other words, once spoken, it is law. So when you decree, you're aligning thought, word, and will into a single vibrational frequency. That's why the energy is so potent. That's why the decree bypasses doubt and imprints uncertainty. If you think about the Hermetic principle of vibration, the Kabbalion says that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. When you understand that, you also understand that when you decree, you create a vibration strong enough to override the looping distortions in the fields. Thoughts can scatter and you can get easily distracted. But a decree, when spoken out loud, anchors thought into the physical plane through sound vibration, meaning that your voice is literally shaping energy into form. Ancient traditions like Hebrew prophets, Vedic mantras, etc., all used decree-like speech because they understood one important thing. Sound is creation. So it says in Job 22:28, you shall also decree a thing and it shall be established unto you. So how does this work in the bloodline entanglement work? The call cut method already mirrors this truth. So when you say call cut, you are declaring authority over a script that is running in your energy field, and you are decreeing an end to the distortion or loop. And this anchors in a new frequency by speaking the realigned truth out loud. So when someone says, call cut, this story ends here, I align with love, abundance, and clarity, they're not just rephrasing their life. They're issuing a cosmic decree that collapses one energetic timeline and activates another. I have a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between making this call cut decree and a prayer? A prayer often asks, a decree assumes and commands. And both have their place, but a decree resonates with the teaching of Jesus, believe you have received it and it shall be yours. And in energetic terms, prayer opens the channel, but the decree sets the frequency. And you have to remember, your voice carries your vibrational signature. No two voices in existence have the same energetic fingerprint. As a matter of fact, we all vibrate to a different harmonic resonance. So when you decree with conviction, you embed your energy into the field, making it uniquely powerful. This is why whispered doubts may carry energy, but spoken decrees shift timelines. If you've ever read Neville Goddard, which I believe everyone should, He talks about the law of assumption. Dare to assume it is done, for assumption, if persisted in, hardens into fact. A decree is simply assumption spoken with authority. So let's get back to how this all ties into the bloodline entanglement and what you can do. First, you have to identify the trauma. You have to see where that bloodline entanglement started. Is it low self-esteem? Is it self-sabotage? Is it undeserving? I'm not good enough. However it shows up, you have to identify it. Awareness is the first step. The second step is to remember that trauma isn't what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you. These inherited trauma stories show up as states of consciousness, not just thought, not just memories. And if we live in that state, it's very hard to get out of ancestral influence. We need to be able to remove ourselves from that state. And in order to do that, we call cut, we break the wheel, and we write a new story. And we don't just write a new story. We decree, we demand, we say, this is my life. And we put an ellipsis and you fill that in with whatever it is your life is, who you are in this world. Studies show that trauma resolution practices, whether it's family constellations, EMDR, somatic therapies, etc., that can change epigenetic markers in children of traumatized parents. HeartMath Institute's research suggests that coherent states like gratitude and compassion will actually restore balance in the energy field, breaking these inherited cycles. So part of this work is not just identifying and not just finding it, calling cut, decreeing it, but we also need forgiveness. Forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others. You know, forgiveness isn't saying that what somebody did to you is okay or what happened to you is okay. From my perspective, forgiveness is acknowledging that everyone plays a role in the greater good of your evolution. And sometimes they play a role in the positive space, and sometimes they play a role in the negative space. When we see others as part of our story, as actors and part of our story, we can have a different level of compassion. Because this is not easy. It is not easy to be human. It is not easy to be here doing any of this. And whether someone shows up as a villain, that person is helping you. That person is challenging you. That person is forcing you to look in that mirror and find you, the real you. When we're dealing with bloodline entanglements, we're dealing with stories that have been passed down for generations. And these stories affect us whether we know what they are or not. These stories are in our bloodline, they're in our DNA, and we act out accordingly. So what happens when we start to heal these things, these traumas, these dramas? Our entire reality changes. Things that we thought were never going to be possible are possible. And the reason I bring up my brother and I is because my brother and I, it really looked like we were never going to be friends. And interestingly enough, I told you about my mom's family. They're all divided, all of them. Some of the siblings still get along, but some of them don't. And they haven't done the healing. Doing the work is sitting in the shadow, sitting with yourself and asking yourself the really hard questions. So when I look at some of my family members and how they're divided, I really thank God that my brother and I got to a point where we could call cut on the bullshit and say, hey, we are all we got. And we don't want our kids to now repeat this cycle. So how do we fix this? All odds were against us that we were not going to have good relationships, that we were going to be in toxic situations, that our kids were then going to repeat what we repeated. And none of that is happening. So when you look at healing and focused energy and intention, when everybody is on the same page and you are on the same page and you are showing up, not just for yourself, but for future generations, you will change reality. You will change the outcome, not just for you, but for those children, for your nieces, for your nephews, for your sons, for your daughters, everyone. I remember the first time I did a call cut in my basement and I said with the decree, this ends with me. And I could feel like my body was vibrating. I said, anyone who comes after me, this ends with me. I remember I called up my girlfriend, who was one of the first people who taught me about bloodline entanglements. And I said, Sandra, I did it. I did it. I felt great. I could feel the glass shatter and the wheel break, and I feel amazing. The only thing that makes me sad is that I said it ends with me, and what about my brother, you know? And she said, your brother's younger than you. And I stopped and I said, oh my God. She said, if it ends with you, regardless of when he came into the earth, even if he came into the earth 5 minutes after you, it breaks for him too. That's how powerful this is. And when I tell you, I have seen that transformation in me and my brother. I have a great relationship with my nephews who I love. They are the cutest, funniest. I couldn't be luckier. And my son is the most adorable love of my life. And when I see them all together and I think, man, they're going to be friends. This is going to be great. They are going to be each other's champions. Sure, they'll get on each other's nerves because that's life, right? Law of rhythm, polarity. But man, we did it. And that is the power of this work. It ripples. Kindness ripples, compassion ripples, empathy ripples, just like hate, violence, competition, negativity, and meanness. It all ripples. And the question is, how do you want to show up in the world? Ask yourself the question, is this the best version of me that there is? You are the master of your life. You are the writer, director, producer of your story. And this is just the beginning. Wherever you are in your journey, you can call cut and start again. And your journey is as unique as your fingerprint, your hair, your smile, the way you shift, heal, and realign deserves a path that's designed for you. So remember, you are not powerless. You are not stuck. What you speak carries the power to collapse distortion and activate your highest timeline. That power is already in you. Thank you for joining me on Call Cut with Angélique. New episodes drop every Friday, so please come back and join us. We have some incredible guests. We're going to talk about some incredible topics, and we would love to have you here. If this content resonates with you, like, subscribe, and share to anyone that you think would enjoy it. Remember, life is a story, and it plays out as a movie. You are the director. You are the writer. Make it a good one. Always keep shining.